There exists a war that many refuse to see. It is not waged with swords or guns, nor does it announce itself with sirens and alarms. It moves in silence, cloaked in deception, thriving in the comfortable ignorance of those who dismiss it. This war is ancient, older than any kingdom or empire, and its battlefield is not found in the ruins of history, but in the very spaces where we live, breathe, and exist. Most people imagine darkness as something loud, something obvious, terrifying, a force that comes with a violent storm or a demonic roar. But this is where they make their gravest mistake. Evil does not always come as an intruder breaking down the door. Often it is an invited guest. It walks in quietly, unnoticed, settling into the corners of our lives through the things we bring into our homes, the objects we cherish, and the symbols we do not question. What if the very things you believe to be harmless are in fact conduits? What if they carry unseen marks, invisible chains, ties to forces older than time itself? Many assume that objects are merely objects, that matter is neutral, that nothing in this world, unless obviously wicked, can have a spiritual effect. But this is the illusion. This is the great deception. For centuries, cultures have understood the power of objects. Warriors have carried charms for protection. Kings have worn rings not just for status, but for spiritual authority. Temples have been filled with idols, not because they were mere decorations, but because spirits attached themselves to them. The modern world has abandoned this understanding, dismissing it as folklore, yet the spiritual realm has not ceased to operate. It has merely adapted. Some things once touched by darkness never leave it. Some objects are claimed. Some are marked by rituals, whispered incantations, silent dedications that you may never hear, but that are as real as the air you breathe. And when these objects enter your home, your life, your space, they do not come alone. They carry weight. They carry whispers. They bring an invisible presence that changes the very atmosphere around you. Have you ever walked into a room and felt a sudden, unexplainable heaviness? Have you ever experienced fear in the middle of the night with no logical cause? Have you noticed unexplained oppression, strange occurrences, or a sense of unease that seems to have no root? These are not always coincidences. There is an old truth that many have forgotten. What you invite in, willingly or unwillingly, will stay unless it is cast out. The enemy thrives in ignorance. He does not need you to bow before him. He only needs you to remain indifferent. He does not need you to speak his name. He only needs you to keep what belongs to him. A single key is enough to open a door. A single item is enough to give permission. If a thief desired entry into your home, would you hand him the key? If an enemy sought to poison you, would you drink from his cup? And yet many unknowingly do just that by keeping objects that serve as invitations. Silent agreements between seen and unseen realms. The war is real, the battle is personal, and the question is not whether it exists, but whether you will acknowledge it. Some will hear these words and dismiss them, just as a man refuses to believe in a coming storm until the floodwaters rise. But others, those who feel the weight of something unseen, those who know deep within that the world is more than what the eyes perceive, they will listen. The time to remove these things is now, not tomorrow, not later. For what you permit to remain may already be calling its master. A symbol is never just a symbol. A flag carries the weight of the nation it represents. A crown is not simply metal and jewels. It is an emblem of rule and authority. A uniform distinguishes its wearer, marking them as belonging to a greater cause. Symbols have meaning, power, and influence, even when we fail to recognize them. And throughout history, the forces of darkness have used them as silent banners of allegiance, subtle yet potent markers that invite what they represent into our lives. Many assume that rebellion is only an act, something that must be spoken, declared, or physically demonstrated. But rebellion has its own language, and it is often communicated through symbols. When Lucifer fell, his rebellion was not merely a rejection of God's rule, but a claim to his own. And from that moment, everything associated with darkness has carried a message: defiance, disorder, the rejection of divine authority. Some symbols are easy to recognize: those that openly mock God, those that are birthed in movements of sin and destruction. But others are deceptively disguised, woven into culture, fashion, and trends until they are no longer questioned. They appear on clothing, jewelry, artwork, and even in the architecture of our cities. Some people wear them unknowingly, unaware that they have adopted an emblem tied to darkness. Others embrace them intentionally, believing them to be expressions of personal freedom. But freedom does not lie in defiance. True freedom is found in surrender, not to the chaos of self-will, but to the order and purpose for which we were created. Yet the enemy whispers otherwise. He entices the world with symbols that promise empowerment while secretly enslaving the soul. The serpent in the garden did not place shackles on Eve. He placed a thought in her mind, a symbol of false independence wrapped in the form of forbidden fruit. And today he does the same. There are symbols that glorify destruction, artistic expressions of death, violence, and lawlessness. There are symbols that honor pagan gods, ancient spirits, and demonic entities disguised as cultural aesthetics. There are images that promote perversion, normalizing what was once called sin, dressing it in beauty, so that people no longer recoil from it. There are logos, signs and insignias that carry histories of occult worship, crafted with precision to hold meaning beyond what the common eye perceives. And yet, people wear them, they decorate their homes with them, they admire them, they celebrate them. They see only the surface, the design, the trend, never questioning the root, never asking where it comes from or what it represents in the spiritual realm. But ignorance does not erase consequence. A man may drink poison, believing it to be water, but his body will suffer the same fate as one who drinks it knowingly. What we align ourselves with matters. What we carry, what we wear, what we display, it all speaks a language whether we understand it or not. And the spiritual realm is always listening. Symbols, like words, have meaning, and meaning invites presence. Some attract heaven, others invite hell. The question is not whether these symbols have power. The question is whether you will allow them power over you. There are doors in this world that should never be opened. Some are locked for a reason, sealed by wisdom older than the foundations of the earth. Yet, curiosity has always been the weakness of man. He touches what should not be touched. He whispers words that should never be spoken. He reaches into the unknown, believing himself to be in control, only to find that he was never the master. He was the prey. The occult does not announce itself with a warning. It does not come dressed in terror. It arrives subtly, cloaked in mystery, wrapped in the promise of knowledge, power, and enlightenment. The same deception that lured Eve in the garden is the same deception that lures men and women today. You will be like gods. The occult offers an invitation to hidden knowledge, secret wisdom, a path to control destiny, fate, or even the spirit world. And yet, behind every promise, there is a price. What most fail to understand is that objects themselves can be doors. A book of spells is not merely ink and paper. It is a written agreement, a manual for calling forces beyond human comprehension. A deck of tarot cards is not just a game, it is a tool designed for communication with spirits who do not come without expectation. A crystal charged with intention is not merely a rock, it is a vessel holding an unseen influence. These are not lifeless trinkets. They are instruments of alignment, objects that carry with them a spiritual weight that far exceeds their physical form. And yet, they find their way into homes. Some keep them as decorations, unaware of the ancient rituals attached to them. Others hold them in fascination, not believing in their power, but keeping them just in case. But spiritual laws do not require belief to be enforced. A man can step off a cliff, doubting gravity the whole way down, but his body will still meet the ground. In the same way, the possession of occult objects invites an influence that does not care whether you acknowledge it or not. There is a reason God warned his people to avoid divination, sorcery, and witchcraft. It was not because he feared competition. It was because he knew what humanity was dealing with. Every dark practice, every ritual, every occult object is an attempt to gain power from a source that is not God, and every attempt to do so is a form of submission, not of the spirits to you, but of you to them. Some say it's just a game, it's just a book, it's just a decoration. But nothing in the spirit realm is just anything. Every object carries a history, an origin, a purpose. There are things crafted for deception, designed to pull you deeper into the shadows without realizing how far you have gone. So the question must be asked, what have you brought into your home? What have you placed on your shelves, in your drawers, on your walls? What are you holding onto that was never meant to be in your possession? The enemy does not need to break into your life if you hand him the key. And often, the key is nothing more than an object, a token, a seemingly harmless item that carries a silent agreement. There are doors that should never be opened, and there are objects that must be removed, because some things, once invited in, do not leave on their own. There are objects in this world that carry more than just history. They carry attachments. Some are old, passed down through generations, touched by unknown hands, used in forgotten rituals. Others are newer, designed with purpose, created with the intent to bind, deceive, or curse. The idea that an object can be spiritually charged is foreign to many, yet it is one of the oldest truths in human history. From the beginning of time, mankind has understood that objects can hold power. Sacred relics were kept in temples. Curses were spoken over idols. Warriors carried charms into battle. Kingdoms stored enchanted artifacts, believing them to hold supernatural strength. But where did this power come from? Who was listening when these objects were prayed over, chanted over, sacrificed over? The physical world is not isolated. What is done in the seen is often influenced by the unseen. Some artifacts were never meant to enter your home. They were crafted for another purpose, dedicated to another spirit, tied to forces that do not break their bonds easily. These are not simply historical objects, they are spiritual conduits. And when they are brought into a place of peace, they disrupt it. Have you ever noticed a shift in atmosphere after acquiring something new? Perhaps an antique that carries a strange weight, a foreign relic that brings with it an unease, a statue, a mask, a carved figure, or an amulet. Something that at first seemed beautiful or intriguing, yet over time brought nothing but heaviness, nightmares, oppression, a sense of dread that had no explanation. There is a reason ancient civilizations performed rituals over their objects. They knew what they were doing. They knew that spirits attach themselves to things, that energy, whether light or dark, can linger. But the modern world has dismissed this, treating spiritual realities as myths, forgetting that some traditions were not born from ignorance, but from experience. Some things cannot be redeemed. Some things are so deeply tied to darkness that they must be destroyed, not kept, not sold, not passed on. A cursed artifact is not simply a piece of history, it is a claim, it is a foothold. It is a legal right for the enemy to remain where he should never be. Think of the battles fought in Scripture, where God commanded his people to destroy the idols and the treasures of foreign nations. Why? Because these objects carried the weight of demonic worship. They were not neutral, they were tainted, and the people who refused to let them go found themselves ensnared by the very spirits those artifacts represented. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to? What have you placed in your home, your room, your hands, without questioning its origin? Some things bring beauty, others bring bondage. Some things are harmless, others are hosts. And if an object carries a claim that does not belong to God, then it has no place in your life. It is better to part with a cursed object than to invite a cursed presence, because what is kept in darkness will always demand more than it first appears to give. Words are not empty, melodies are not harmless. The things we listen to, the things we read, they shape us in ways we often fail to realize. Music and literature are not just forms of entertainment, they are vessels. They carry messages, ideologies, and spirits. They stir emotions, influence thoughts, and shift atmospheres. And the question is not whether they affect us. Since the beginning of time, words have carried power. With words, the universe was spoken into existence. With words, kingdoms have risen and fallen. With words, people have been blessed and people have been cursed. Every book, every song, every spoken or written word either aligns with the light or the darkness. There is no neutrality. Music is one of the most underestimated spiritual forces in existence. It was not created by man. It was created before time, before the earth was formed. Scripture tells us that before his fall, Lucifer was adorned with instruments designed to worship in the presence of God. And when he fell, he did not abandon music, he corrupted it. He twisted it, using it as a tool to influence, to deceive, to lure people into his world without them even realizing it. Many songs today glorify rebellion. They celebrate sin, mock righteousness, and promote indulgence in every form of darkness, lust, anger, greed, violence, pride. And yet, people fill their ears with these melodies daily, absorbing lyrics that slowly erode their sensitivity to truth. They sing along, not realizing they are declaring things over their own lives. Words of destruction, perversion, hopelessness. The enemy does not need you to bow before him. He only needs you to agree with him. And sometimes, agreement comes in the form of a chorus, sung over and over again. And then there is literature, the stories that fill minds and hearts, the words that shape beliefs. Many think books are just entertainment, just fantasy, just fiction. But fiction has the power to shape reality. A lie told beautifully is still a lie, and deception wrapped in an engaging story is still deception. There are books that promote darkness in ways that are subtle yet dangerous. Books that glorify the occult, books that celebrate perversion, books that make sin appear noble, adventurous, even heroic. The danger is not always in the obvious. The enemy knows that if he makes his message too blatant, people will resist. So he weaves it in carefully, hiding poison in pages that seem harmless until the reader's mind has been molded without even realizing it. What we consume, we become. The songs we sing, the stories we embrace, the words we speak, they either bring life or they bring death. This is why Scripture warns us to guard our hearts, for out of them flow the issues of life. If the music we listen to, the books we read, and the words we meditate on do not align with truth, then what are they aligning us with? Some will argue it's just a song, it's just a book, but nothing is just anything. The unseen realm operates on agreements. The enemy does not need an invitation in the form of a ritual sometimes. All he needs is for you to sing his anthem or repeat his words. So ask yourself, what have you been filling your mind with? What melodies have been shaping your soul? What stories have been altering your thoughts? Because what enters your heart will one day come out in your life. And if you are singing the enemy's song, do not be surprised when you find yourself dancing to his tune. There is a reason God commanded, "You shall have no other gods before me." It was not a suggestion. It was not a mere preference. It was a warning, a declaration of spiritual law. Because where there is worship, there is presence. And where there is idolatry, there is an open door. An idol is not just a statue of wood or stone. It is not just a relic sitting on a shelf. a piece of art or an artifact of culture. It is a throne, a claim, a place of invitation for something unseen. Throughout history, civilizations have bowed before images, carved figures, and symbols of power, believing them to hold spiritual significance. And they were not wrong. These objects were not empty, they were not meaningless. They were vessels, seats for the spirits that answered when men called upon them. People today look at ancient idols and think that was superstition, that was the ignorance of old civilizations. But the truth is, the spirits behind those idols never died. They never disappeared. They simply changed their disguises. Idolatry is not dead. It is alive in new forms, more subtle, more deceptive, more acceptable. Some bring idols into their homes without realizing what they carry. They collect statues from foreign lands, symbols from ancient religions, images that once received worship. They see them as decorations, antiques, souvenirs. But what they do not realize is that some objects have been dedicated, prayed over, sacrificed over, marked as spiritual property. And when they are placed in a home, the presence that once surrounded them does not simply vanish. Others embrace false religious objects, believing them to bring protection, luck, or blessing. Charms, talismans, beads, amulets, things that claim to hold power, yet whose origins trace back to the occult, to pagan rituals, to false gods. They are not sources of safety, they are bonds of deception. A man who carries a charm for protection does not realize he is placing his trust in something other than God. He does not see that what he holds is not shielding him. Idolatry is not just about worshipping statues. It is about giving honor, reverence, and trust to anything other than the one who is worthy. And spiritual laws remain unchanged. What is honored will invite presence. If an object has been used to honor something unholy, then it will attract the presence of the unholy. This is why God commanded his people to destroy the idols of the nations they conquered, to burn them, to break them, to remove them entirely, not to repurpose them, not to store them away. Because some things are not neutral, some things belong to the darkness. So the question must be asked, what have you brought into your home? What have you placed in your life that carries the presence of something that does not belong? A statue, a charm, a relic. These may seem like small things, but a small crack in the foundation is all it takes for a house to fall. A small compromise is all it takes for the enemy to gain ground. And once he has a foothold, he does not leave willingly. If there is anything in your home, in your life, in your heart that does not belong to God, then it must be removed. Because what you permit to remain may be the very thing standing between you and the freedom you were meant to walk in. Nothing in this world is neutral. Every object, every image, every word, and every symbol carries meaning, influence, and consequence. The enemy does not always enter through grand displays of darkness. He often comes through what seems insignificant, what appears harmless. He hides in the details, in the overlooked, in the small things that people bring into their lives without a second thought. But what we possess, we permit, and what we permit has power. There are things in your home, in your life, in your hands right now that may be open doors. Doors that invite darkness. Doors that speak a silent agreement with forces that do not belong. It does not matter whether you believe in their power. The spiritual realm is not built on human belief, but on spiritual law. And law does not bend to ignorance. So what will you do? Will you let these things remain? Will you dismiss them as superstition? Or will you take action, clearing your life of anything that has no place in the presence of God? The choice is yours. But understand this, whatever you allow, you align with, and whatever you align with, you invite. The enemy does not ask for permission when he is welcomed. He does not need to force his way in when the door is already open. But the same is true of God. If you remove what does not belong, if you cleanse your life of the things that attract darkness, then light will fill the space instead. Peace will take the place of oppression. Freedom will replace the unseen chains. And the presence of God will dwell where once there was only confusion, fear, and heaviness. Remove these things, burn them, throw them away, break every agreement, no matter how small. Because what you tolerate today may rule over you tomorrow. And you were never called to live under the weight of darkness. You were called to walk in the light.